Welcome back to As a Former History Major, where I explore niche history topics you've probably never heard of. I'm your host, Kendall, and today, for this episode, we're doing something a little bit different. If you know me, if you know this show, you know that we mostly do topics that are within the ancient, medieval, or Renaissance studies, things like that, figures within those time periods. But today we're going to do something a little bit different, something that's never been heard of on the show, in the history of this show, never been done before. We're going to talk about a house in Alabama.
Huh?
I am currently taking a Writing in Birmingham course here at UAB, go Blazers, but our final project is to do extensive research on something relatively unknown within the city, whether it be a myth or a tale or a ghost story or a building or a person or anything like that, so long as we personally relate to it. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm not only a poser on the internet pretending to know history, but I'm also an aspiring acting teacher and actor. I've taught and been a part of many different theater programs here in Birmingham, but I currently teach classes and help out with Artplay, which is a part of UAB's Arts Alliance. So Artplay teaches a variety of art, dance, theater, and writing courses for all ages, and it's located in 5 Points South in what I've always known as the Artplay House. The Artplay House, also known as the Robertson-Johnson House, is a Victorian-era or Queen Anne-style eclectic wooden framed house that still stands today after 120 years of wear, tear, and love.
Queen Anne exterior style, complete with asymmetrical designs, bay windows, and iconic turrets, flourished during Alabama's industrial boom years of the late 1880s and the 1890s. The nearly 8,000 square foot house is now painted the iconic Artplay dark green, but the 1955 and 1958 shots I sourced from newspaper clippings and photo negatives from tax assessments show the house as lightly colored or white when used as housing during the mid-20th century. These pictures show a medieval chimney described in the 5 Points South neighborhood article, which no longer stands on the exterior of the house today. Okay, I'm about to use some really big words, some big architecture terminology. So I'm going to have like a big word describer on the screen just to tell you what they mean. Because that's yes, like obviously I'm going to do that. Okay, whatever. Okay. The outside holds barge-boarded gables as its main roofing on all the floors, and the third level front-facing window has a top-rounded adorned pediment. This house uniquely holds its iconic round turret on the west side corner, holding rounded convex windows on all its floors. The front porch is pedimented through the front stairs by 3 feet and is supported by paired ionic columns on all its front sides. The entrance hall and the cornered sunroom of the Robertson-Johnson house are, in my opinion, the most beautiful spaces in the entire house. Every detail is shown in the grand interior in the first floor. There's stark white and detailed molding and shapes carved into the ceiling. There's recreated original green Rococo wallpapers spanning the 12-foot walls. The bench-molded sitting area off to the right of the main entrance holds a 1935 cobalt glass and crystal chandelier from Paris, leading up the ornate tread bracket stairs and onto the second floor. Today, the second floor holds a dance studio, a voice recording studio, an art room, and a poetry room. Now, the classes that I teach are held in the bright green dance studio, complete with a tiny stage and working curtain. The third floor has an assembly of offices for the current UAB Artplay staff, but what stands out in it is the third-story room within the house's turret, a breathtaking, wooden beam-adorned piano room.
So how did I get this information in these pictures? Well, I had to visit the Birmingham Public Library archives. I've never visited any archives before, even though I am a former history major, so it was pretty exciting, but it was a long process. After many emails and figuring out what a parcel number was and what a board of equalization file was, and being brought to this room and putting all my belongings in a locker and then being adorned with gloves, like I was finally able to hold the file in person and track the history of the house and its changes and owners from 1935 to 1974. Okay, so taxes and turrets and houses and everything aside, it's time for the big question. Who owned the house?
Today, most people who work in and around the UAB Arts departments associate every building, program, and event with the famous local figure Alice Robinson Stevens, who was a tireless art supporter and Birmingham native. Stevens' financial and influential support helped establish UAB Arts as the entertaining, educational, and cultural regional powerhouse it is today. She poured millions of dollars into the local arts, funding multiple projects in and around UAB that led to the 1996 construction of the Alice Stevens Center shortly after her death. Her daughter, Jane Stevens Comer, carried on her legacy, making major donations to local artistic and cultural pillars like the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, the Birmingham Museum of Art, and Red Mountain Theater. Jane's further push is why Artplay exists today.
Alice and her descendants' names and contributions are woven so deeply into UAB Arts that many people just assume that they had a direct hand in the construction of all of its landmarks, including Artplay. Many misconstrued ideas have formed from this, with some assuming that the house belonged to or was built by Jane Stevens Comer or Alice Robinson Stevens herself, but this couldn't be any further from the truth.
Despite the Stevens' well-known generosity and strong presence in the Birmingham community, they had nothing to do with the original history and ownership of Artplay's building. The family didn't live in, own, or even visit the house until Jane Stevens Comer founded Artplay and brought it under UAB Arts' wing in 2010. While it's tempting to try and loop every UAB Arts branch back to Alice and Jane's influence, the story of Artplay's house is a chapter that began before the Stevens' name even emerged within the Birmingham scene.
On the other hand, a name that helped form the Birmingham scene was of the Robertson brothers.
William Vance Murray Robertson Sr. was born January 1st in New Iberia, Louisiana, a year before his brother Henry Murray Robertson during the outbreak of the Civil War in the United States. The young brothers made their arrival in the boom town of Birmingham in 1891, looking to make a fortune in the business of loan lending. William and Henry founded the Alabama Home Building and Loan Association to lend money to members to hold and lease property, with Henry holding the position of president and WVM as general manager for the majority of their lives in the city. Their company flourished, setting up both of the brothers as the businessmen and frontrunners of Birmingham.
Now, these brothers are the names that you'll see first when doing surface-level research on the origins of this house. Some online sources say that it was brother Henry who constructed and lived and built the home, but all historical sources and dating and the 1896 Birmingham Public Directory say that it was actually William.
The Robertson-Johnson house was built in 1896 by William Vance Murray Robertson. William lived in the house for the entire rest of his lifetime, raising his 3 children with wife Bertha there. William Vance Murray Robertson Jr., Edward Abel Robertson, and Margaret White Robertson.
So what was originally very interesting to me about Mr. WVM was actually on a Flickr post that I found by this guy named Brian who wrote it in 2010. So listen, the article says, hold on, this is a lot. Yes, I have a Stanley. Don't say anything. The article says, William Van Murray Robertson, Henry's brother, was a general manager and then served as president until his death in 1927. Newspaper reports said that he died in his bathtub from an ice pick to the heart, which authorities reported as suicide. Hello? What? No other online or physical resource that I had encountered on any historical anything had made any sort of claim similar to this regarding William's death. And I couldn't find any other information anywhere. So I'm on Flickr, and I attempted to contact Brian's online user, but he hadn't been active in over 10 years. And then he cited his source to the Magic City Post writer Rebecca. I'm sorry, Rebecca, I'm not going to say your last name, but I am going to use you in this because you inspired Brian, who inspired me. The Magic City Post was an online news and community website that only operated from 2010 to 2013, and I didn't have a way to review or access that because the website doesn't exist anymore. So I did some stalking and actually found Rebecca on LinkedIn, and I sent her a very lengthy message explaining my situation to her and asking for any other leads she may have on the subject, or if she even wrote about that, or even though it was something that she said supposedly and inspired Brian over 14 years ago. And then she responded. She actually responded to me. And I was busy and I didn't get back to her for like a month. And so I emailed her and I was like, oh yeah, we're going. This is gonna be a ghost story. I'm gonna turn this to a ghost story. And then I got ghosted. Yeah, she never responded back. But it's okay. I can't say that I didn't try. You know, I mean, am I disappointed? Yes, because I did really want this to be something cool, but it literally is just a guy who loaned money and just had a cool house.
The Dixie manufacturer describes William's death happening after being in ill health for more than 2 years. Brother Henry's obituary describes his death as one that was caused by a brief illness of heart trouble. But this is the closest piece of information that I can find through legitimate news sources that have anything to do with a heart death.
I mean, like, if we think about it, William was like a very popular businessman within Birmingham. Like, he was very well known. So if he were to actually die in the bathtub and get stabbed in the heart, and then apparently it's a suicide, it would have been plastered all over the papers, all over the news, all over everything, and I would have found anything citing that. So it just isn't true. Whatever. I'm letting it go. This is me letting it go.
After William died in 1927, we know that the house had been converted into a boarding home and rented out during the Great Depression. However, there is no ownership or name of this house that I could possibly find. WVM Jr. and all of his siblings who remained living in Birmingham resided in other houses for the years following, so it doesn't seem like any of them directly inherited it. The address of the house completely disappears in the city directory, and the only trace of any person living there from 1927 to 1935 is a school teacher by the name of Annie Laurie Watson, renting out apartment A in 1934.
1935 is when the Board of Equalization file was born under the ownership of a woman named C.K. Price.
I couldn't find any record of this woman or her full name anywhere in the city directories or newspapers. Her name is listed as landlord and owner until 1944, with only records of a single couple renting from her remaining today. The ownership is passed to the couple W. Ernest White and Bessie White in 1944.
I couldn't find any more information or pictures of these two, but I did find the obituary of their youngest son, Ernest Sonny White, who passed away in 2020, and also apparently really liked Alabama football. Rip Sonny. Roll Tide. In 1946, the Whites sold the house to a woman by the name of E. Leona Morrill, who is listed in the 1946 Birmingham City Directory as a chiropractor. Period.
I couldn't find any more information or pictures of Mrs. Morrill, and I also couldn't find any records of anyone renting out the house from her during her time as the owner. But maybe she just used the house for residence and also for her chiropractic practice, maybe.
In 1948, the house is purchased from the mother, Georgia, of the other half of the namesake of this house, Thomas Lawrence Johnson. The house remained in he and his family's ownership until his death in 1986.
Thomas and his wife lived upstairs and rented 3 apartments on the ground floor to tenants. Some records of tenants I found are William H. Beddoe in 1949, schoolteacher Paulette Augsbach in 1965, and schoolteacher Mrs. Dorothy D. Glidewell in 1968. He installed a new dining room chandelier that once hung in the first Jewish synagogue in New Orleans. At his death on January 26, 1986, his home was donated to the university by his family.
Once it was given to UAB, the house was used as apartments for medical students until 2009. In 2009, Jane Stephens Comer, Alice Stephens' formerly mentioned daughter, donated $5 million to the Alice Stephens Center to found the music, dance, theater, and art learning center that we know today, Artplay. Teaching at Artplay, being in the Robertson-Johnson house, and walking through its grand hallways that have held almost 130 years worth of laughter and teaching and dance. I'm just glad that I get to be a part of the history that it holds and a voice that it has heard while telling us its story.
I completely forgot to record this part as I was wrapping up this episode, but before we end things, just remember that if I got anything wrong, it's not my fault, it's because I got it from these sources. And after all, I'm just a former history major.
That's all for this episode of As a Former History Major. Stay tuned for our next episode where we talk about the first Egyptian pharaoh and the rock that told us so. Bye!